In this video, we'll dive into the outerwear fall-winter 2025-2026. It's going to be a two-part series, so make sure to watch it to the end to understand what's going on in fashion right now and know just what to invest in or wear out of your closet. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Design or Design. My name is Maria and this channel is all about fashion, all about trends, all about fashion analysis. As I mentioned, this is a two-part series and today we're going to be covering more of a classic styles of outerwear, and next video is going to be a little bit more street style, so let's get into it. And we'll start with furs. So on the runways, there were so many furs, faux furs, real furs, maybe imitation of furs as well. We see feathers as well. I don't want, is it fur? It's birds fur. And in variety of lengths, we see full on head to floor fur coats. We see maybe more of cropped ones, and these ones are quite incredible. Sometimes we even see the furs being combined together, maybe different color furs combined together. As you can see, I'm wearing a little bit of a fur moment myself. This was gifted to me by a consignment store owner. And in my opinion, if you buy it used, then you're just saving it from the landfill and nobody is hurting in that situation.
Fur's popularity today is driven by a mix of factors, including its association with luxury and status, its particular benefits like the warmth and durability, resurgence in vintage and ethically sourced forms. The mob wife aesthetic popularized on social media has also fueled demand for both real and faux furs, particularly vintage pieces as a symbol of opulence and a departure from minimalist trends.
We see some really voluminous furs from Alaya here in variety of models, maybe a little vest, a situation, maybe like a puffer, and this huge monstrosity that is perfect for a Bigfoot in a forest. We also see it in Alexander McQueen. I'm not sure if those are feathers or not, but there's so much drama, so much volume in the upper half.
Some of the outfits were balanced with a very flowy skirts just to create that grounding effect.
Really liked how Acne Studios had the furs. They looked a little bit more modern. They almost had this kind of a lantern shaped sleeves. Pretty cool. We also seen a little bit more of a teddy situation in a few. Dolce & Gabbana combined the luxurious furs with more of a street style looks like you see here, sometimes paired with a graphic tee and some really chunky motor boots. Sometimes there were even like almost tails coming off of the jackets. Dress Van Noten with this longer fringe. I'm not sure what that is, but I just put this here. Anyways, these furs definitely create a lot of volume, it's a statement piece, definitely. Fendi, definitely one of those brands that do still use real fur because it is in their brand DNA. That's where they started. They had so much great examples. I know a lot of you will hate me for saying that the fur is great, but it's beautiful. Like, I cannot say anything. And they had some interesting craftsmanship when it came to it by creating little cuts and making almost like a pattern inside a single fur or having it almost lines. We also see this in Gucci, more of a dressier versions for men as well as women, paired with elegant dresses. Prada also had their fur a little bit like hodgepodge, so they were glued together in an interesting way.
If a classical fur coat would try to hide the seams of the two pieces of hide, we are seeing the exact opposite of it, of intentionally showing off the seams.
Ferrari had a longer fur, almost looking like hair. Honestly, maybe there are hair. Can you imagine a human hair coat? That would be cool. Michael Kors also creating that almost hair-like textures in variety of colors.
In Schiaparelli, the long hair-like texture is actually embroidered with rust-colored glycerian ostrich feathers.
I particularly love the cropped fur jackets just because that is my go-to when emphasizing my body shape.
It creates the volume necessary to highlight the waistline by having the contrasting volumes.
Ulla Johnson had more of a textured furs. I'm not sure if they're real or not. Schiaparelli here as well with kind of the same interesting textures. And they're presented in both more of the classical coats as well as a more modern takes on it. Here we see Simon Rocha
with almost tentacle-like fur fringe.
The animal prints in shows like Robert Cavalli, as well as Vakvera, Coach, Chloe, Alexander McQueen, Jill Sanders, and Dries Van Noten.
These leopard prints ranged from cheetah or leopard print to more of a zebra print to a even cow print in some variety of ways. It's pretty cool. I quite like the variety of the prints that are presented, but the cow print is definitely one of my favorites.
And a variety of other shows also had imperfect furs that didn't really have a pattern, but they're still there. We also see patterns created through fur, like shows like in Etro, Fendi, as well as Todd's.
And we see stripes, chevron pattern, as well as in Fendi, this dot and line one. If it's made out of real fur, it is such a consuming task.
We also seen some dresses made of fur, especially in shows like Acne Studios as well as Simone Rocha. We see the bralettes made of fur. These are really interesting. Vakvera here and Michael Kors, more of a vest or more of a smaller something. Maybe it's an accessory that you can put on top of a coat, or they can stand on their own, at least some of them. Yeah, Dolce & Gabbana, almost like a dress fur here, or like a little bit of a shorter sleeveless thing. Burberry and some other shows had more of a different texture, but I've decided to include here just for the fun of it. Dries Van Noten with those tassels, really incredible. It was a really great alternative. All right, next one up is the fur trim. Not that far from fur at all, but we see so many different shows incorporating fur pieces like inside of a hood, or maybe it's just the trim around something, or maybe the lining of the whole jacket is fur, or maybe it's more like a shearling with the seams having the fur peek out. And once again, I did not do much of a deep dive to figure out which shows presented faux and which ones did not, but I know that there's great progress into the sustainable furs by growing them, but most of them would be made out of plastic, unfortunately. One thing that was definitely everywhere on the runways would be the collar fur. So just the collar of the jacket would be lined with fur, and I think this is something that we could pull off and maybe even repurpose our jackets or create an add-on and just have that collar being in fur or a fuzzy something or other. In fact, I want to create a color of my own. I have this bag that my cousin gave me, and it's all filled with little trims of different sheep fur or llama, I'm not sure. So it was just basically axe trimmings that were going to landfill. So I'm thinking of creating something interesting using that, maybe a little bit of patchwork, but I'm afraid of starting to learn a new craft because I have too many hobbies and no time to do them. And when I'm going to be talking about the accessories, this will definitely be more relevant, but that's a topic for a different video. Shows like, you can see here, Prada, almost like having a full animal around the neck. We see in Ganni an asymmetrical collar in fur, as well as more of the lined hoods. This trend definitely creates more warmth and comfort for the wearer, especially if the whole garment is lined inside with the outer layer protecting from the elements.
And the textures of the coats themselves varied from denim, leather, wool, and polyester itself.
Really love the Jill Sanders here with the high collar as well as just laid back as well. Many other shows like Fendi also had this color on more of a regular type coat. Roberta Cavalli had the color as well as the trim on the bottom of the garment, and Schiaparelli had this huge shoulder moment with an exaggerated collar. I find this really great. Chloe had more of the trims or the accent on the sleeves being in fur or just the ends of it, and you can see some of them looked as if the furs were almost raw, like the raw edges of the fur. They were not cut back or anything, and I find it really cool. Like having a leather jacket or leather coat and having just this extra piece of fur, almost like a raw hide on top. We also see the more of the shearling kind of in Chanel and more other shows. Ultra Zara even had boots that had this shearling effect, de-squared with really interesting things. Once again, having the shearling moments, having more of those colors, or just a trim around a hood. We also see more easier versions in Etro, just having this texture peep through all of the seams of the garments.
It really adds the essence of warmth and softness to this more structured items.
Max Mara had some sleeve moment. I think this is like an extra. Maybe it's like a vest with something extra. Miu Miu here more having a scarf, but I wasn't sure if it was part of the garment or not. Louis Vuitton also having this longer texture. Maybe those are feathers, but my favorite was definitely the Valentino show where they used the fur trim in unpredicted ways of having just a simple jacket with really extravagant cuffs, or just the lining of the edges on the bottom of the hems of some garments. Really cool. I quite like it. Definitely something statement making.
Bringing back the 60s aesthetic and a little bit of a Y2K action. I feel it. I feel it somewhere in there, especially in the fur trimmed cardigans.
Schiaparelli here again with more of a leather corset on the top. Ralph Lauren with more of a wearable everyday looks here. And yeah. Now that we've seen a lot of leathers, we're going into the full leather looks. We see a lot of this continuing from previous seasons, and definitely leather is one of those items that is great for fall, especially. It is a rain repellent, it's amazing, and it's still here with us. So if you have invested into something good and something quality, then I encourage you to take it out and still continue wearing it. And it was here in variety of ways. It was either like little bomber jackets, it was in blazers, it was in coats, it was in just like a regular worker jackets as well. And I loved how Miu Miu Show had them a little bit more worn down, a little bit more vintage looking. So this is a great example of going thrifting and finding some really great leathers that were loved and used and had a life on their own. The more really pristine ones, I don't feel like they look as in right now.
One thing that I have noticed is that there was not a lot of suede, and let's face it, suede is not for rainy weather.
Some interesting coloring like here in Roberta Cavalli with a gradient, or an interesting layout like here in Diesel of having a little bit more of a de-stress, but I'm sure that's not leather. I'm pretty sure that's just print on canvas of a more of that rubbery material. Coach had so many floor length coats as well as some blazers in this leather, and I know there are so many of these examples in thrift stores, in your vintage consignment stores. Yeah, you guys go ahead. And we see a little bit more of the oversized trends as well as more tailored jackets, a little bit more snug.
If you have the oversized jacket, wear it, but be on a search for a smaller version.
Saint Laurent had the 80s with the huge shoulders, but the muted colors that are modern and popular today. I feel like my dad had several of these jackets back in the 90s as well. So think about the browns, the maybe even greens, and even a little bit more on a burgundy side. We also see in Chloe here a little bit more feminine versions of these
with more flared out bottom sections of the coats like skirts.
Acne Studios floor length leather coats, D squared, had variety of them, maybe a little bit of a vest action, maybe a little bit more of a biker situation. Naomi Campbell here wearing almost a onesie.
Really heavy emphasis on the biker aesthetic. I don't know about you guys, but these really long leather coats are just speaking to me.
I also loved how some of the leathers had more of a floral motifs, like an Alexander McQueen and Burberry here. Is that stitching? I'm not sure, but the patent leather items really have my heart and I love them a lot. And just as furs, some of them don't have to be real leather, they can be faux leather. And here in Versace, they can even have really funky colors like purples and really interesting lining inside. Fendi had variety of leathers as well, whether it's a trench coat, more voluminous, a blazer, or more strict and smaller garments as well.
I'm also in love with these leather ribbed items. The texture of leather creates these crescent sleeves.
Ferragamo also having a variety of blazers, of jackets,
coats, bomber jackets.
Ferrari had different colored ones with kind of gradients of them, as well as just simple one color. I'm not sure if this is black or really deep burgundy color, but here we have the cherry red, really deep, something that we've seen in previous seasons, still being popular today.
Heavy use of fringe and contrasting textures.
Gucci had a lot of men's coats, just more of a voluminous, simple ones, as well as different colored ones. Givenchy had more of a vest situation. Louis Vuitton almost creating a full outfits out of leather items. And yes, we do see full leather looks like we've seen them before.
It's nothing novel for us coming from the runways, but in real life I haven't seen a lot of use like that.
As well as mixing interesting textures together, something like maybe lace. We also see Zimmermann here, the full cropped suit with leather pants. We also see Tory Burch with a bunch of little pockets on those jackets. And yes, they ranged from really large oversized pieces to more tailored ones. We also seen a few dresses on the runways. I wouldn't say it's as much as we've seen before, but here they are. To sum things up, yes, we do see lots of leather. Yes, it's in variety of ways. Sometimes it's a little bit more feminine, sometimes it's a little bit more masculine, sometimes it's just basic motorcycle kind of a jacket, sometimes it's more of a biker's, like a retro one.
This trend will give you opportunity to live out your Matrix fantasies with the long black trench coats and protect you from the weather, whatever may come.
All right, next one up are the coats. As you can see, I'm going for a little bit more of a classical items here. I had such a huge collection of these little videos that I did not want to eliminate them because they were gathering most of the video. So I split it in two. And this one is more conservative, a little bit more classic versions, a little bit more safe versions. Why would this be on the runways? The more simpler, the more classical, the less the designers are taking risks. It shows us the fact that we are going into economic downfall. So the pieces are more safe, so people are more likely to purchase them because they think that it will last them for longer. So many grays, dark blues, blacks are on the runways. There are more classical in nature. They are more fitted even, and even longer. So we see more of a emphasis on having more fabric on the coats, using longer silhouettes. Even in MSGM here, mixing the sport and the classical, had so many of these oversized coats, once again in those really safe colors. Sometimes they had a little bit of a print on them, but it wasn't intense, it wasn't too crazy.
Don't get me wrong, there were some designers like Diesel that presented more deconstructed versions, but nothing crazy. Majority of items were very classically made and yet boring maybe, but then if they lacked in the interest, they gained in quality. And sometimes they had some unique aspects of the design to them, sometimes creating an interesting silhouette or using an unexpected texture.
Max Mara here with a little bit more of pop of a color, but they were still tame, they were still quite safe. They were in the beiges and the deep reds and the brown, something that will last for a long time for an average consumer. And yes, of course, the styling of things does create more interest in those outfits, so styling them with maybe a leotard or something that will pop up, but you don't have to wear it this way.
In the Dress Van Noten show, they used elements on the lapels to bring attention, as well as really vibrant prints.
Coach had lots and lots, once again, floor length coats, a little bit on a more sportier side. Courageous also having a little bit of an interesting cut of the collar. Maybe they have asymmetric buttons, so it's more on one side. Chloe had, once again, more feminine items that would work great with boho style. Fendi, yes, more. So for females, sometimes they were a little bit cinched in at the waistline. For men, it was a little bit more boxier, more wider. We see the silhouette in women's wear as well.
I'm sure many of you have these amazing classical coats in your closet, so I encourage you to get them out of their storage and start wearing them today.
Burberry, of course, they had this Alaya. I really loved their almost like a hood-like collars. Really great, extravagant, while still really classical and safe. Versace here, also more of this French coats, or those coats that we've seen made in leather, done again in more of what we used to, a texture in coats.
Just imagine a classical wool coat with this amazing underlining.
And we see a lot of monochromatic outfits with the coat being the same color as the outfit underneath. Here in Etro, it was, even the print was everywhere on the inner garments as well as on the outer garments, or sometimes they were clashing in patterns. Of course, the regular ones were created as well, just to increase that sellability of the garment. For me, I really love the extra long coat that almost hits the ground, as it creates a more longer silhouette, and you'll be able to look a little bit taller just because it just draws your eye up and down, and it does not have any of the stops. Also, having a little bit of an accent on the waistline works great, but the longer the better, in my opinion. But the longer you go, you need to make sure that you're not going to ruin your coat by it dragging on the floor or the steps when you're walking downstairs.
Ferrari presented us some of the more cinched in coats, very easy to introduce into your wardrobe and office friendly. And we also see some major power shoulders from Givenchy. They're amazing in establishing your dominance while intimidating some of your co-workers.
Isabel Marant kind of mixed this boho, sporty, chic vibes with those really classical coats, and it is definitely my favorite way to go, of just having a really easy going bottom layer and then having this more classical, more structured coat to elevate the outfit. You're comfortable, you're warm, and you're still classy. Jill Sanders having many different coats, and I love this gradient of the pattern here. Ulla Johnson, a little bit more of an artsy prints on their more voluminous garments, a little bit color gradient here and there maybe some pop of color. These would work great for maximalist styles as well as boho styles, while the more classical would go pretty much with any style as long as you combine it with something that is more closely speaks to your personal style. We see Stella McCartney once again with a little bit more of an oversized examples. Sometimes they were belted, sometimes they had a dropped waist belt. Not sure about that one. I'm not the biggest fan of that.
But talk about those intimidation shoulders.
We also see some lapels on there. Sometimes they're a silky lapel, almost looking like a tuxedo, but in a coat format. Tom Ford had a variety of really simple classical items that are really work appropriate, as well as can be a statement making piece like this almost really dark red cherry looks, as well as really light ones, which would be great for spring summer as well. Victoria Beckham had some experimentation with the hems, which were pretty cool. And we're getting into the trench coat territory. It's still a coat, but it is what it is. It's usually done in more of a lighter fabric. Here we see in Burberry fringe being part of it for sure.
Leave it up to them to rethink how they would change up the thing that their brand has created.
I really love Givenchy and Jill Sanders here, how they have almost a cropped one on top of it, creating emphasis on the waistline and just maximizing the difference between the waistline and that flap on the back and the front of the garment. We also see other shows creating it, like here in Todd's, trenches in leather. Sometimes they had a little bit of a pattern on there, and trench coats are classic. And right now we're seeing more of a rethinking of the trench coat. How will it look? Maybe deconstruction. I really like deconstructed trench coats. I feel like it's a statement making. It's something really interesting to look at and breathes new life into the classical trench coat. Here you see even having extra material adds the backing and making a little bit more fluid,
creating contrast with its sharp tailoring.
All right, next one up is the Hourglass. Yes, emphasis on the waistline, and we see this in a variety of shows, especially Schiaparelli. Like, those outerwear garments are to die for. We also see in shows like Dolce & Gabbana, more in the shorter coats as well as longer coats. Valentino even had it for men's through the use of a rubber band sewn inside the garment.
For women, they opt up for some more delicate pleating effect with the bow.
Tory Burch, a little bit more slender items. Maybe sometimes they had a belt, sometimes they had just the natural shape of this hourglass, even without the belt.
I love the visual tension she created using the shiny nylon fabric, and it's pulling the waist in. Style experimentation doesn't end there. We have a sequins belted blazer, as well as this really interesting one with the mesh covering the lapels and the entire jacket all together.
I really like the Alexander McQueens. They had more emphasis on the hips, creating maybe somewhat of a peplum, or just having extra something on the hips just to make that waist look even more snatched than it is, or adding of pockets on here like in Max Mara. Many shows, as I mentioned, had the belting of the garments. Yes, you can do something like this with what you already own, but not all of them would be gatherable, if you know what I mean. If you have a lighter fabric items, then yes, a belt would work for sure. But if it's a sturdier item, then not everything will be belted, as it just creates more bulk in the midsection and does not look great. Even shows like Diesel, more of a modern take on things, still had that hourglass effect with more emphasis on the waistline.
Usually garments of this nature would be made out of a heavier, sturdier fabric that can hold its shape, or it would need a lot of structure and backbone to hold it.
Here in Todd's, again, just simple coats that were a little bit more suited with the belts, undercovered, a little bit more sportier ones,
bringing somewhat a cross between a puffer and a blazer.
Dress Van Noten pairing really large statement belts that have this corset effect, and sometimes a little bit of the extravagant ones. Fendi also had little peplum situations in their garments, as well as just belted items as well. Ferrari here for men's and women's, they introduced into the office wear more of the waistline effect. Givenchy with exaggerated hips and exaggerated waistlines, again in the dresses, in the blazers, and in coats themselves. But remember, we're talking about outerwear, so yes. Another example of the more office wear attire, but have it cinched. You can create this illusion by using something really oversized at the top and then belting something, or putting on a set on your midsection and creating volume like that, and then having maybe like an A-line skirt as the bottom. But we do see a lot of pencil skirts here with the use of peplum to create those volumes. We also see some oversized blazers, but still the emphasis on the hips. I actually have done a little bit of reworking of my oversized blazers from thrift stores and just made them a little bit more suited, took them in at the waist, and they look great. But if you want to do it yourself, look for something light to medium fabric. That would make your work a little bit easier.
Many brands are reintroducing their archival pieces just because of that uncertainty in the economy. They're thinking if they're going to release those pieces that sold well in the past, that they can sell them again today. This may be the reason behind all of these more flattering pieces.
Here in Off-White, we see more of a sporty situation happening. I know I said I was gonna be talking about more classical ones, but you can see that they have still an emphasis on that waistline. Although they're sporty, they have these kind of detachable items, or I'm not even sure what they are. Yes, the torture of living really far away from civilization and not being able to go to the stores to actually see how things are made is definitely something that I'm struggling with. As I've been saying about the more classical versions, a little bit more tailored versions, a little bit more waistline attention grabbing items, we have reached the section about blazers. Yes, blazers is still here. Are they the same? In this video, I'll be discussing more tailored blazers, little more subtle ones, not by print like here in Roberta Cavalli or undercover with the butterflies, but they were more tailored. They were smaller, they didn't have this crazy oversized feel to it like we've seen in previous seasons. They were petite, sometimes I wouldn't say cropped, but they were shorter for sure, sometimes even shorter sleeve like here in Gucci. We also see them in variety of colors, variety of textures. Here Ralph Lauren having a little bit more vintage vibes, a little bit more dressier ones. Alexander McQueen and many other shows had more of the simple black ones that would fit variety of extravagant events as well as office wear. Alberto Ferretti here with more emphasis on interesting details like around the collar,
with unique lapel designs, maybe encrusted in beadwork or fringe and excess fabric.
We also see Burberry with the velvet suiting, the full suit, really eye-catching. D-square with more of tuxedo vibes, with the lapels being in silk or maybe rhinestones, or other ideas here crystallized as well. Both men and women. We also see that kiss thing, I'm not sure. Fendi here, once again, the lapels are different and there is a little bit of a deconstruction of the buttons. I quite like it. Once again, a little bit of a shorter sleeve here too. Ferragamo having little pockets. Tom Ford, yes, lots in Tom Ford and in variety of colors. These would last you throughout the fall, winter, and spring, summer if you choose to go that bright. But look at that combination, pairing a bright color with something neutral like brown. If you want to learn more about the pairing of the colors for this upcoming season, I encourage you to check out the video that I already made. It's pretty good. If you want to just know which colors are popular, there's another video for that. Whew, I am sweating in all of these layers, guys. Stella McCartney, yes, they are a little bit oversized, but still not that much. Gucci here for men's and women's show. so many blazers and I love it. The only thing is I have a huge collection of these super oversized blazers and now I need to figure out what to do with it. Probably I'm going to be taking them in at the waistline. Yes. Anyways, here you go, you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video and you understand if this is your jam, what to look out for. I've covered the more classical examples in this video and it's a 40-minute video, you guys. So you know for sure that going classical will not screw you over. If you have watched to the end, I really appreciate it. Just make sure to leave down in the comments maybe a smiley emoji. I would really appreciate it and then I'll know for sure that you watched till the end. Other ways you can support my channel and me would be to like this video, subscribe if you're not already, and share it with somebody who loves the fall winter season. I just love it because of all the layering. Like there's so many things that you can do. If you want to see how I dress from day to day and some interesting snippets from maybe backstage of the creative shoots or local runways or some other little things, then check out my Instagram where I do exactly that. I try not to overpost. If I have something to post, I'll do that. But then if I'm editing videos at home and wearing my pajamas, then I don't do it, okay? So yeah, you're welcome. Anyways, you guys, thank you very much for watching and I hope you have an amazing rest of the day. Yeah, stay classy. Bye.